So let's do this. Spend a couple of minutes with quick intro. I've got a couple of questions for each of you guys. I'll play the role of host and participant, but I'll go last so that you guys each get a chance. And then we'll do some Q&A at the end. So first, why don't we each sort of go down the list, introduce ourselves, a little bit about your background, as well as a little bit of background about the book that you just wrote. So Rohit, you want to go first?
Okay. Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. My name is Rohit Bhargava, and I wrote a book in May called Likeonomics, which is all about why likable people and companies succeed and why unlikable people don't. And I'm a marketing consultant. I spent 8 years leading digital strategy at Ogilvy. Before that, I spent 4 years leading strategy at Leo Burnett in Australia. So I've worked with companies in all kinds of industries. Along that time, I've launched a couple of different startups. I've launched failing startups, and I've worked on successful ones. So some failure, some success, and I'm happy to chat today.
Brant?
Yep. Successes and failures, that's what I was going to say. So my name is Brant Cooper. I was working in a number of startups in the 90s, 2000s, and same things. Failures, successes, start thinking about what's the difference, what can you learn from the failures, what can you learn from the successes. Started looking at how do you do learning before executing, and was introduced to Steve Blank's The 4 Steps to the Epiphany, which is a book you should check out. I wrote sort of a cheat sheet of that back in 2010, and now I have a new book called The Lean Entrepreneur, which takes a look at some of Eric Ries's combination of fast, agile development technologies, plus this learning before executing. And we're taking it outside of tech, so it's going mainstream, enterprises, small businesses, people that want to change their lives, change their businesses, become more innovative, or change the world. So that's what I'm about these days.
Great. And I'm Brad Feld. I'm a partner in a venture capital firm in Boulder called Foundry Group. I'm one of 4 partners there. We do early stage software internet investing. I also co-founded Techstars, which is the leading mentor-driven accelerator that spawned a number of other mentor-driven accelerators around the world. I've also been writing books now since 2010. The first book was called Do More Faster, which were lessons from Techstars that I wrote with David Cohen, who's the CEO of Techstars. Second book was a book called Venture Deals, Be Smarter Than Your Lawyer and Venture Capitalist, which has become one of the, I think, authoritative books around raising financing. And then recently I started a series of books called Startup Revolution. The first came out last fall. It's a book called Startup Communities, Building an Entrepreneurial Ecosystem in Your City. And it's all about what we've done in Boulder, Colorado, but also more broadly, how you can apply those ideas to building an entrepreneurial ecosystem anywhere in the world. And many of the ideas around startup communities were informed by and informed a lot of the activity around Startup America. So I've worked closely with Startup America over the last 2 years, both as I've thought through this process and I think as they built their regional strategy. My most recent book, which is coming out this month, it'll be out any day, is called StartupLIVE, Surviving and Thriving in a Relationship with an Entrepreneur. And this is a book I wrote with my wife, Amy Batchelor, and it's all about the challenges and ways to think about the entrepreneurial life and how a couple, whether it's one partner is an entrepreneur or both partners are entrepreneurs, can build a successful life together while you have this entrepreneurial cadence. So first question, and I'm going to ask some inside baseball questions about writing as well as some things about the book. How long did it take to write the books? And what was your work process like during that period of time?
Yeah, so I have 2 books, and both of mine have been the very traditional sold through major publishers formats. And so for me, both of those took a year from the time when I signed the deal to the time when the book actually came out. So the writing process was probably about 6 months of writing, a couple months of research, and both books were very different in terms of, the first one was very much like my philosophy of life. It was called Personality Not Included. It's all about why we need to have a personality, why that matters. And the second one was much more research-based, so I actually went out and did studies and found studies and wrote about them. So very different process. And I used a very visual process, so I started taking things out, and I actually put a presentation together on what it takes to write a book, because I know a lot of people aspire, probably a lot of you aspire to write your own books one day. And so it's on SlideShare, and it's called How to Write and Sell a Book. Very simple title. The how-to is, one of those trade secrets, right? Everybody starts their search with how to. So if you ever want to try and get your content out there, start titling it with how to, and people will actually find it. It works all the time. And so that presentation sort of goes through and says, I graph this out visually, I use note cards, then I use Post-its, then I actually started writing it piece by piece. And that was sort of the approach that I took.
So my two books actually were quite different. The first book was sort of a greenfield book. There was these concepts out there about lean startup, customer development, but there were no purpose-written books around that topic. So I actually found that the book kind of wrote itself. It took me only about 4 months. And it's a relatively short book, but people praise it because it's not full of fluff. There's no airport businessy stuff inside that first book. Second one, wow, this is like, by February, it's going to be 16 months, and I actually found it, really difficult getting the detail and organizing it. And I've actually really treated it like a startup. So interacting with my readers, sending content, getting feedback, and then once it's done and going through a very painful editing process, we start ramping up the marketing and the selling. And again, it's just like a startup. And I actually break my own rules, right? I want to think big. How am I going to get, thousands of readers? And what you really do, just like in a startup, you actually have to make your actions, you have to bring your tactics down to actionable levels, right? I mean, most common thing I heard from a startup, I need 1,000 customers. How many do you have? 0. No, you don't need 1,000, you need 1. And it's actually the same thing with a book. I want tens of thousands of readers. Well, how many do you have? A handful. Well, so you need a handful more. And so you make the tactics of the book and the marketing actionable, so I can actually go out and get those people, and do really fine-tuning my market segmentation so that my messages are tailored to these different market segments. So hopefully, in the end, my market's big enough for maybe even a bestseller. Who knows?
So for me, a book typically takes me three-ish months to write, from beginning to end. Writing is a sideshow. It's a hobby for me. So I have a full-time job as a venture capital investor, and I've learned that I can write very, very productively for about 2 to 4 hours a day. And so my writing generally takes place between 5 and 9 in the morning, and I just crank a bunch of stuff out. And the iterative cycle of getting a book done, in my case, is a lot easier, I think, because I'm writing about topics I understand really well that I've been carrying around in my brain for a while. So it's really the process of documenting something that I've actually really thought hard about versus doing the research and then trying to put the stuff together. So next question, give us an example from the most recent book that you think describes clearly, Rohit, in your case, Likeonomics, Brant, in your case, Lean Entrepreneur, and I'll do StartupLIVE. But, like a 2-minute anecdote so people have a real sense of what the book's about.
Yeah, so for me, the book was inspired by a moment 10 years ago that I actually never realized would lead to a book. But it was something I saw over and over again in my career, which was that I was leading, actually at that time I was a part of a team that was pitching for a client's business. And we had one of those moments where we had the perfect pitch. We had the best idea, we had the right team, everything felt really, really good. And we walked into that pitch and we delivered everything that we wanted to say. We talked about all the ideas we wanted to share, and we walked out and we thought we won that. And we got a call a couple of days later and we lost. And we couldn't figure out how we lost because we knew that we had something better than the people we were competing against. And it was only about a year later that I ended up meeting that client again at an event. And I asked her, are you happy with your agency? You want to, make a switch? When she said, we're happy, then I said, how come we lost? And she said, well, you guys had good ideas and they had good ideas, but we like them better. We wanted to work with them. We could imagine every day working with that team, and we picked them. And over again in my career, whether it's somebody getting hired, whether it's someone doing the extra mile for someone else, I saw this phenomenon that when you have, I mean, you know, all you guys are in this entrepreneurial mode of thinking. Maybe you've got investors, maybe you don't. But in any given day, you are not the only thing that someone else is working on. So the question is, do they wake up and do the extra thing for you? Not what they said they would do, but the extra thing. Do they have the idea in the shower that helps your business? Do they talk about your business when they go to networking events? And why do they and why don't they? And to me, it came down to we talk about and we do more for the people that we like. And that's what I thought, but I knew that if I was going to come up with a soft, squishy idea like that, I needed to have some real research behind it. So for me, that meant going out, looking at psychological research, looking at behavioral research, looking at some real hard data to say, is this actually true? Or is it just something that I think? And when I found that it actually was something that was true, that helped me to put the structure around the book.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, passion is actually what gets people to share products. So people, just because you deliver a value prop doesn't mean you win. It's something beyond. It's this
needs
passion.
more than just the idea.
Right. So I think that primarily the message of the lean entrepreneur is don't be a faith-based startup, right? And so you can have a lot of conviction in your idea, but conviction doesn't change the reality of whether you have a great idea or not. And there's one case study in particular in the book that I think it exemplifies what we recommend, and that's Lucas Carlson of AppFog. I don't know if you know him, Brad, but basically this guy's got a great idea to build this cloud service for PHP, which is a programming language. And he's on Hacker News, and he's talking about it with a bunch of people. Hey, you know, what do you think about this idea? And everybody's going, yeah, it's great, you know. And so he goes, okay, I'm going to build this. And it's late one Friday night, and his wife is going, it's late, you know, come to bed. And he's going, okay, you know, normally I would sit down and I'd just start building this project. But instead what he does is he puts up a landing page, puts up his messaging, has a call to action, which is join my beta program, as if the application already existed. He goes back to Hacker News, and he posts on Hacker News, beta's open. Come to my website. He goes to bed, wakes up the next morning, 800 people are signed up for his beta program. He has not written one line of code, right? Classic Mechanical Turk or concierge or landing page MVP, right? Minimum viable product. But he doesn't just leave it there, right? First he starts building. 1 week goes by, 2 weeks goes by. He's all, I promised these people something, and I have nothing to show them. 4 weeks go by, he has nothing to show them. And he's thinking to himself, if I continue down this path, it's going to take me 6 months to build this product. What's going to happen to these 800 people? These 800 people that, by the way, now are 4,000 people signed up for his beta program. So what he does this, what we call a high hurdle experiment. He doesn't believe that those 4,000 people are necessarily passionate or they have the depth of pain necessary to build a business around. So he decides to give them a marketing survey. But he doesn't do a best practices survey. He doesn't say, here's 9 questions with radio buttons and checkboxes. It's a 9-page survey, open-ended questions. What's your favorite color? You know, why are you here? What's the meaning of life? He wants to make it so people will not fill out the survey. He's not gonna automatically believe these 4,000 people are that into it. He wants to get a dozen or 2 dozen people willing to fill out that survey. 2,000 people filled out that survey. And out of the data in that 2,000, he found all sorts of assumptions that he had about his product that were wrong. And so then he only built just the user interface, just the 3 or 4 things that would deliver the value prop. And he built just the back end for that. It only took him a week, and the guy exponential growth since then. So to me, that summarizes, epitomizes what the lean entrepreneur is all about.
So in StartupLIVE, we have lots and lots of stories and anecdotes, including lots of personal stories, but we have about 20 other entrepreneurial couples that contribute to the book, specific things. One of the chapters, sort of midway through the book, Amy and I went through a whole series of things that we've implemented that come from my own, my wife's name is Amy, comes from my own behavior as an engineer. So we reached a point in 2001, after being together for a decade, where she basically told me she was done. And I thought she was just done with a tough week, but in fact, she was done. And she was done because, not because she didn't love me and we weren't really happy together, but she was just tired of this dynamic of she wasn't prioritized against anything else. So I told her I wasn't done, and it's very, very hard for people to change behavior, and it's especially powerful when you realize that about yourself. So I said to her, give me some rules. And if you just give me some rules, I'll follow some rules. And of course, her first reaction to that was, that's not very romantic. You know, fuck that, no rules for you. And I said, no, be patient with me. I'm an engineer. Like, try it. And she got it. So we came up with a series of things that we do on a continual basis. And I'll give you 2 examples that are very actionable of a list of about 20 from this chapter. One is we do something on the first night of every month we call Life Dinner. And what we do is, or the way that Life Dinner came about, she says, can we just schedule one night a month, not date night, we have plenty of date nights, but one night a month to go out to dinner and have a special dinner where we just talk about what's been going on and look forward and just get synced up once a month. And I said, I'm not sure if I can commit to that. And she said, well, do you use an online calendar? And at the time I was using Outlook. And I said, yeah, I use Outlook. And she says, do they have a repeating calendar entry in that? And I said, yeah. She says, well, how about you schedule from 6 to 10 p.m. on the first day of every month for dinner with me called Life Dinner from now, and repeat it until forever. And I'm like, all right, and that's what I did. So, and when I switched to Google Calendar, of course, it imported, and it's still forever. So we go out, and sometimes we talk for 3 minutes, and sometimes we talk for 3 hours, and sometimes it's a very easy thing, and sometimes there's lots of tears and emotion. And we also give each other a gift. And sometimes the gifts are things like jewelry or art or a remote control fart machine or a car. So just whatever we feel like, but it's a way for every month for us to celebrate our life together as a couple where we're totally focused on each other. The other example is I don't have a particularly good governor on myself as an entrepreneur. Those of you that know me know I run really, really hot. I work incredibly hard. And by not having a governor, you can totally burn out. And for me, what was happening was I was getting into these modes where I was just completely exhausted, and she would refer to it as she was getting the dregs. Like all she got was the bottom of the barrel in terms of her interaction with me. So we implemented something called the quarterly QX vacation, which is once a quarter for a week, we go off the grid. I give her my cell phone on Saturday, or my smartphone on Saturday. She gives it back to me the following Saturday. No phone, no email, no interaction. My assistant knows how to find me if there's an emergency, so we can always sync up in that context. And a lot of people say, well, I don't have 4 weeks of vacation a year. I can't do that. And the answer is, that's fine. Do it for a day or do it for a weekend. But sort of that notion of this temporal period gave me the ability to recharge, but then also there's something magical as a couple when you're spending all your life with everything else that's imposing on you, to all of a sudden the two of you once for a period of time on a repeating basis, where the only 2 things in the world that matter are the 2 of you. So I've got one more question for each of you, and then I think we probably have room for 1 or 2 questions from the audience before we got a break. So I know you're publishing with Wiley, who I publish with. You're publishing with?
McGraw-Hill and
McGraw-Hill.
Wiley.
So in this age of self-publishing, and the publishing industry is undergoing massive transformation and what is the one thing that you have found to be useful or powerful about having a publisher? And what is the thing that surprised you the most that you thought a publisher would do for you that they are completely and totally useless at? And I'm gonna text the person that's telling me I have to come meet with them in a sec. So go.
So most publishers are completely useless, and I wasn't surprised by that. So I think anyone who thinks, oh, I'll get a big publishing deal with a nice advance, and then they'll do all of this other stuff, and all I have to do is write the book, is completely kidding themselves. So do not think that your publisher will do that, because none of them do that. I think the biggest thing that I had my expectations were right down here in terms of what they would do. And so probably the question that you're thinking is, well, why would you go with a big publisher if your expectations are all the way down here? And for me, one of the big reasons was it mattered to me to have international distribution and translations. I had 9 translations of my first book. This one's on track to do many more than that, and I do a lot of global work. And that is still almost impossible to do with a self-published book. So that was my major reason for going with a big publisher. That may or may not be important to you. A couple of weeks ago, I launched my first self-published book, which was a book called The 15 Trends, Marketing Trends for 2013, which I just published on Amazon myself. And I did a PowerPoint version of it, and then the ebook was on sale on Amazon. First, it was free for the first couple of days, then it was $2.99, then it went up to $4.99. It's sold thousands of copies already in a couple of weeks. It's on track probably by March to at least make as much as my first book did, and it's just by myself. So you don't have to share the revenue, because it's you can do the math yourself. A retail price of a book, $25. Author's percentage is usually 15%. So 15% of $25, if it sells for $25, usually on Amazon it'll sell for $14, $15. So you're 15% of 14 or $15. Now contrast that with 70% of $5. Right. So you're making either the same amount of money or less. I wrote my 15 trend book in 4 weeks. It took me a year to write my real book, quote unquote. So, self-publishing is a huge factor. I'm personally going to be doing both of them in different ways and for different reasons. I think there's still a value to both. I don't think traditional publishing is dead by any means, but I do think you need to walk into it with your eyes open, knowing what you're going to get and knowing where you need to push and what you can actually get out of it. So I'm happy to talk to anybody about that. I've done both. I know whether it's better to do this one or that one, and if you're thinking about a book, I can definitely help you figure out whether it's better to do this and that. And it's worth mentioning, just last thing, that there are now a number of hybrid publishers out there where it's kind of like self-publishing, but they have a lot of the distribution and mainstream connections of the big publishers as well. So there are ways of doing it in between. It isn't just publish on Amazon or go with a big publisher and that's it. So there's a lot of hybrid models now too.
Yeah, so I think I went into it with eyes wide open as well. To me, it comes down to platform. If you already have a super large platform, I'm not sure you need a traditional publisher. But for most people, a large publisher will still bring a platform with them that's maybe bigger than what you already have. So I self-published first, and I use that to build a platform, but it's still not sort of the mainstream audience that I assume that I might be able to get with a traditional publisher. I'm still right in the middle of the process, so my assumptions are maybe wrong still. Sort of on the negative side, I guess I'm blown away that these guys couldn't make my writing any better. So there really is there's no design, no editing.
I was just blown away they couldn't catch typos.
No, there's no real. I thought there would be editing. There's none of that. So it's really all on you as an author. Everybody knows you have to do your own marketing unless you're, one of the biggest writers out there. But it's also you have to do your own design. You have to do your own layout, really, even your own editing, your own proofreading. It's all on you. I guess what they have are these really old machines that sit in warehouses in low-rent districts that print out books. I think that's about all they got left.
All right, so since we're running out of time, I'm going to, instead of answering that, I'm going to tell one last thing that I think every author you ever encounter would appreciate. Actually, 2 things. And then I'm going to bolt because I'm going to go to my next thing, and you guys can hang around a little bit to answer questions if people have questions. Okay. So 2 things quickly. Number 1, every author loves it when you buy their book. So one of the things, if you are interested in any of these 3 books or any of the things that we've written, just buy it. It's a couple of cups of coffee, but it makes an enormous difference. And it's interesting how many times you learn so much about a new person because you buy their book, even if you don't get to it right away. So one of the things I think that's so phenomenal about, especially electronic books, is they're relatively low cost. $10, $12, and the power of that is significant. So I'll be a good book salesman and encourage you to buy it. The second part of that is if you read the book and you like it, write a review on Amazon. It is amazing how much impact for a young author thoughtful reviews on Amazon are. And as I like to say to people, if you like the book, please write a review. And if you don't like the book, just don't tell anyone. Thanks. I'll let you guys answer questions.
Thanks, Brad.
Good to see you. Nice to see you.
So we have time for a couple questions.
Is it working? Okay. So I'm thinking as an entrepreneur, you don't really have time to write a whole book and build a company. What kind of writings would be beneficial to an entrepreneur that's trying to grow a company and raise money?
Blog.
Blogging about?
The industry that you're in. Do content marketing. It's a very effective way to bring people in. You want inbound marketing, content marketing, become the expert in what you're selling, provide value in the content itself. People should love you for your content regardless of your product.
I have a slightly different answer, which is get written about in a book. Because you don't have to do all the writing. You don't have to do all the work yourself. And if there's one thing that is definitely the case for every author, it's that we all desperately need stories. We need great stories. And not only do we write about them, maybe a lot of us have our own blogs as well. So it's not only that we write about them on blogs, we write about them in books, but we stand up and do keynotes in front of lots of people and talk about the stories that we have. So if you're one of those stories, you're getting all this free exposure, and guess what? You didn't have to write anything.
Approaching like a publisher, how would you compare the pitch of a book versus like a pitch of a startup? And I guess at what stage do you think that needs to come up? Is it before you write the book, during, or after? Because I know it's conflicting.
Yeah, I mean, I can share my experience. It's very similar. Most publishers care about only very few things. They sort of care about the idea, right? That sort of matters. But what matters even more is what sort of platform do you have to be able to sell a lot of copies of the book day one? Why are you the best person to write that book? Could be a great idea. I could come up with the greatest dating book ever. But why am I the guy who should write that book, right? Because that's part of the story they have to tell. And if you don't have a good answer for that, you could have the best idea for a book in the world. You could come up with Harry Potter, but if you didn't have that sort of background to be able to say, I do this, I do that, therefore I'm the perfect guy for this, you can't sell the book. So those are a couple of the things that they sort of look at to say, okay, we can go with this person. The other thing I'll say that really helped me is I sold my first book deal to McGraw-Hill in 2008. And I'd been writing a blog for 4 years at that point. And so a lot of times when you sell your first book, they want to see the first couple chapters, which is like the most intimidating thing ever, because you say, I want to sell a book. And they say, let me see the first 3 chapters. And you're like, well, those are the hardest chapters to write. But if you have a blog, they know that you know how to write. So I sold my first book deal off of a 20-page PowerPoint. I sold the second one off of a 10-page PowerPoint. Got the advance, then I wrote the book.
So in my case, I self-published the first one, and we sold over 20,000 copies of it, which was enough to have the publishers come to us. But again, it just goes back. It demonstrates platform. So that's really, in that way, it's exactly like a startup, right? I mean, you can't raise money now without proving your business model. As an author, you have to bring the platform, and you have to be the right person. Exactly right. Anyone else? So if you do actually want to buy my book, it would be very helpful for me if you bought it from my site, leanentrepreneur.co, because I'm in pre-order stage now, and we're offering all sorts of extra bennies like interviews of people that we interviewed in the book. We've got videos that actually go through some of our exercises. So lots of extras. Sorry, shameless plug. Leanentrepreneur.co would be very helpful. Thanks.